Hey, welcome back to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with Lena Taylor, but first let's hear from our podcast sponsors. We want to thank Final Forms for their support of the podcast and Wednesday Wisdom. Final Forms is the industry leader in registration, but you have to know this. Final Forms is more than just forms and registration. Final Forms is a team, it's technology, and it's a service that serves schools with things like compliance, communication, and risk management solutions. Final Forms can help your stakeholders with things like mobile accessibility, has reminders for parents about policies and physicals and all the forms that go along with athletics. Final Forms can help with team communication, with attendance, and even certification management for coaches. And for ADs, Final Forms can help with things like eligibility, with rosters, and all the reports that come across your desk. And it does this with secure language translation and ADA compliance. You know, it's time for you to talk to a team that's walked in your shoes. To take the next step, find out what Final Forms can do for you and your program, go to finalforms.com/Jake. That's finalforms.com/Jake to get started and become a member of the Final Forms team. We also want to thank Violet Defense for their support. Violet Defense is dedicated to protecting our world from germs by bringing the power of UV disinfection to everyday spaces. Their patented technology enables them to harness the power of the sun to incorporate ultraviolet light into products and environments like never before. Whether you're ready to implement existing products, or if you'd like to explore researching and developing a custom deployment of their technology for your school, Violet Defense has the solutions and the experience you need. Go to violetdefense.com for more information about their great products. We also want to thank Sideline Interactive for their support of Wednesday Wisdom. You know, it's becoming harder and harder to fund an athletic department, but Sideline Interactive's indoor scoring tables and video boards can generate $10,000 or more every year while creating excitement in the gym and the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. Go to sidelineinteractive.com or call 832-786-0302 to schedule a live web demo and see their tables and boards in action. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com for more information. That's sales@sidelineinteractive.com and see exactly what their fantastic products can do for you and your school. We also want to thank Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. You know, they're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. They provide a variety of interactive touchscreen video consoles and an extensive library of templates to make it easier than ever to recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present. For ideas on how to showcase your school's diverse history and your proudest moments, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Or to learn more and get started with your digital Wall of Fame tribute, call them at 614-981-3589, or you can email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. That's sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank Huddle for their support of Wednesday Wisdom. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. Over 180,000 teams, including some of the best in the world, use Huddle to elevate the performance of their teams using video and analytics. Huddle's the complete performance platform. They have online tools, mobile and desktop apps, smart cameras like the Huddle Focus. There's always been analytics, but there's a whole lot more. Huddle's also built for every level of play, from club and youth teams all the way through high school and college teams. And even the pros use Huddle to help their athletes play at the highest level. You're in pretty good company with over 6 million users, including your student athletes, a lot of their parents, and the coaches of the college teams you're trying to get to recruit your kids. If you want to find out more about what Huddle can do for you and your program and how your school can become a Huddle school, go to huddle.com and talk to their professionals. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. We also want to thank our good friends at Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. You can find out more about what hometown ticketing can do for you by going to hometownticketing.com and talk to their experts. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. And we want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack for sponsoring the Athletic Director Toolbox segment of our podcast. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic program. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack also connects you with the 95% of the parents and the players who really love your program. And it gives them a voice to help demonstrate the importance that a positive athletic experience has for them. Go to athleticsurveys.com and check out their testimonials, and then give them a call at 1-800-738-6466, or you can email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. If you've never used a survey to take the pulse of your parents or your student athletes, you're really missing out. Talk to the pros at Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack and let them show you how to take your athletic program from good to great. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast and Wednesday Wisdom. Our guest today is Lena Taylor. Lena's one of our most popular guests on Wednesday Wisdom. She's a former Olympian, a two-time Olympian, and now she's taken her skill set and created Close the Gap Leadership, which is a company that works with universities, Fortune 500 companies on developing leaders. Also hosts her very own very popular podcast, Next Level Podcast. And she's here today to help us all try to figure out how to be better leaders. Lena Taylor, welcome back to Wednesday Wisdom.
Hi, Jake. It's so good to see you again. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're catching you just coming back from your spring break. So we hope you're refreshed and ready to go. A lot of our ADs are coming back from spring break as well. You and I were talking before we started the show about, how athletic directors can, let's say, do a better job of managing the workload of the job of being a leader for their program. And we hit on a couple of bullet points. So the first one we talked about was the importance of prioritizing. So how can that help an athletic director or any leader do a better job?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an important topic because I find myself too in this situation where you have so many tasks that hit you on a daily basis. And then all of a sudden, there are the unpredictable ones. And they seem to be the most urgent ones that need to be taken care of. And so what I find that people oftentimes do, including myself, I'm not perfect at this. So what I find myself struggling sometimes with is that those urgent tasks seem to eat up a lot of my quality time that I had set to do some important thinking or some deep thinking, if I'm doing some writing or planning, which takes a lot of time to get to that space. And then when something urgent jumps up, what kind of systems do we have in place to take care of those urgent tasks so that we can use our time to prioritize the important ones? So we talk about these 4 quadrants. One of them is what is urgent and important. The other one is what is urgent but not important, meaning that those are urgent tasks that need to be dealt on a daily basis, but they really aren't that, they really don't affect the bigger picture, what we want to create into the world. But there are things that you have to deal with, like paying bills, for example, but an athletic director will have hundreds of those on a weekly basis, right? Then we talk about what is non-urgent and non-important. And then the last quadrant, which is where we want to spend most of our time in, is what is non-urgent but important, so that we don't feel the stress of those urgent tasks that are coming up. And so this is kind of a way to look at how do we organize our time in those different quadrants and allow for how are we going to deal with. And I think one of the most important things there is is really empowering the people around us in a time when there are those urgent but not important tasks that somebody else can do. Do they have the power? Do they have your trust to take that task off your list?
Yeah, as you were going through those quadrants, yeah, I'm sure it's true in other areas of business and leadership, but athletic directors will joke about, I've got a list of 5 things that I want to do when I sit down at my desk first thing in the morning. And at the end of the day, they might not have gotten to any of those because of these, urgent but unimportant or important, but things that come up. It just happens. So again, being organized, being able to prioritize is just so critical. The empowering component was the second one that you and I talked about. And I think it's something that athletic directors really want to do for their coaches is empower them and give them a lot more freedom. So what are some tips for ADs that can help bring this about?
Absolutely. And just to finish that topic with the prioritizing tasks, I just recently started doing something that has really paid off for me, which is at night, at the end of my day or before I go to sleep at night, I started writing down what are 3 things that I did today that helped me move on some of those important things to me, the things that are really important to me. And some days I have nothing to write because all I've done is put out fires, and I've done but just having that practice has helped me shift my focus and make sure that I do create that space and time in my day to move forward one step closer in those really important things. So this has been just a very simple practice. Before you close your bags for the end of the day, just simply write in your organizer, what are 3 things that I did today that helped me move closer? And if you didn't have a chance to do them, then just write them down. And those will be the first 3 things that you do the next morning. It's just a wonderful way to organize those important things. So just to finish that topic, I wanted to give that tip because it's been really rewarding for me to see that I am moving closer in those things that are really important and that really matter in the big picture, because those are the tasks that we do that give us the energy, right, on a daily basis to really tackle some of the other more urgent but unimportant problems that we face. And now, in terms of empowering the people around us, it's, we all fall into this trap sometimes where that you're good at something and it's been your strength. And now somebody else is about to take over that task. Well, of course, they may be younger than you. They may not have the experience that you have. And the first impulse that we have is to, start managing them, micromanaging and telling them, okay, you got to do this, you got to do that. But the moment that you start doing that, of course, it becomes a crutch. It becomes a crutch for you. It becomes a crutch for the other person. And it's very disempowering. So developing a coaching mindset in how we manage our office is really, really important, right? Seeing and asking people through some very strategic questions, help them arrive at how they can do the task. Now, it may not be as efficient at first, where you have to take the time to coach someone on how to do it, but it will pay off hugely at the end. And especially at times when we get things thrown at us from different directions that we don't see coming. So the key point here is to apply our coaching skills and develop a coaching mindset in how we manage our office and how we empower the people around us.
Yeah. I love that. You probably saw me writing down notes like crazy. For a lot of ADs, they come to the job from the coaching world. And I think a lot of times those coaching skills, they don't utilize them as they should. They become more of that administrator and less of a coach. And I love the visual there, at least the visual for me, of using those coaching skills.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very, very powerful and empowering to the people around you as well.
Yeah, and that's one of the fun things to do is when you see your coaches grow and continue their path as coaches. Very cool stuff. We'll do this at the end of the interview, Lena. But if one of our listeners, as always, wants to reach out and get in touch with you, find out more about Close the Gap and your other things, what's the best way that they can get in touch with you?
The best way, everything is on my website. It's lenataylor.com. There's a way to send me an email, and I answer all of my emails. So if somebody's curious about what are some of the ways in which I coach executives in some of the biggest companies in the world, or one of the most effective ways that I've seen is doing team building, virtual team building events. So that is one of my strengths. I'm able to create a wonderful space of interaction where people really can look at some of the big goals and then organize their skills and what they need to do to reach those goals.
All
So
right.
lenataylor.com, or send me an email, lena@lenataylor.com.
This is Wednesday Wisdom. We've got Lena Taylor from Close the Gap Leadership and Next Level Podcast. We're going to take a quick break and hear from a couple of our sponsors, but please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thank you to Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack for their support of Wednesday Wisdom and the Educational AD Podcast. Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic program. Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack also gives you a connection with the 95% of the parents and the student athletes who really love your program. And it gives them a voice to help demonstrate the importance that a positive athletic experience has for them. Go to athleticsurveys.com and check out their testimonials, and then give them a call at 1-800-738-6466, or you can email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. If you've never used a survey to take the pulse of your parents or your student athletes, you're really missing out. Talk to the pros at Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack and let them show you how to take your athletic program from good to great. We also want to say thanks to Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. They're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. They have a variety of interactive touchscreen video consoles, along with an extensive library of templates to make it easier than ever to recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present. For ideas on how to showcase your school's diverse history and your proudest moments, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Or to learn more and get started with your digital Wall of Fame tribute, call them at 614-981-3589, or you can email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. That's sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Wednesday Wisdom. Our guest is Lena Taylor from Close the Gap Leadership, Olympic volleyball player, and now a guru for Fortune 500 companies. Lena, we're talking about ways that athletic directors can manage, deal with, be productive with all the things that come across their desk. The first two tips you mentioned, prioritizing and then working to empower your coaches and your staff. The next point that you and I talked about was creating psychological safety. Share with our listeners exactly what that is and how they can do that.
Psychological safety is the building block of trust. Now, we know from our practical experience as coaches and being on teams ourselves is that this is the most basic and vital underlying component that we have to create in an organization in order to be successful. So trust is kind of, if you can imagine a pyramid, it stands at the base of the pyramid. And one of the most important ways that we can create trust is by creating consciously and meticulously creating the space of psychological safety. What is psychological safety? This is an environment where you actively solicit the opinions and feelings from the people around you. and you make it safe for them to say what they think, even if it may be contrary to what they think that you think. So creating that environment is very, very key. I'll give you an example, Jake. Now, this is what happened when my sister and I were looking to qualify for the Olympics. Against all odds, we didn't have a coach, we didn't have any kind of funding. We were basically weekend warriors playing a new sport, beach volleyball, and trying to play at the highest level. Now, with only 2 months left in the Olympic qualification process, we had made it to number 73 in the world, but that wasn't good enough. If we wanted to play in the Olympics, we had to be in the top 23, which meant that there were 50 other teams who were ahead of us in the ranking, and we only had 2 months to surpass them. Now, by any stretch of the imagination, it seemed like an impossible task, but we know what happened. We were able to do it. So how were we able to do that? Going into that last stretch, I sat down with my sister and we were about to leave on this big long trip, for 2 months. And I asked her the night before we left, now, why do you think that we deserve to qualify for the Olympics ahead of those 50 other teams that are ahead of us in the ranking who have played the sport longer? They have funding, they have coaches, and we have never beaten them before. And she simply looked at me and said, I have no idea. Now, hearing that answer, of course, I could have jumped up and said, what do you mean you have no idea? We're about to embark on the most important trip in our life. But I realized that she was speaking her truth. And the place for me there was I sort of, kind of took a deep breath and I realized we need a strategy. We need a strategy. But this space, this moment between us, airing out this unspoken thing that we don't know if we have what it takes to make it there. It was the most important bond that we could create in that moment that allowed us later on, as we were walking through the weeks, to stick to our strategy. Now, the strategy that we came up with was this. It was twofold. The first part of it was to find what is our biggest distraction and eliminate that. And looking at the situation, I realized that our biggest distraction was not the 50 other teams who were ahead of us in the ranking. In fact, our biggest distraction turned out to be the ranking itself. Because if you looked at it on paper or on the computer, it looked impossible. How are we going to do this, right? So we made a commitment in that moment. We made a commitment that we're not going to look at the ranking. We were very clear on where we needed to be. We needed to be in the top 23. But we made a commitment to not look at the ranking because no matter how hard we stared at the ranking, there was nothing we could do to change it. And you see, volleyball and our lives are played on the court. They're not played on paper. So once you identify where you want to be, now it's time to take that outside and focus only on the things that you can control. So the second part of the strategy that we came up with was, what is something we can do right now that will take us closer in the direction that we want to go? Now, I'm telling you this story because this is exactly, little by little, every week we were able to do that, what was seemingly impossible at the beginning of the season, and in a very short amount of time, right? We had a very short, defined amount of time to do it. But what allowed us to come up with that and do it in the moment was that key question and the space that was created for us to say, we don't know if we've got it, but we're going to go and we're going to try no matter what, and just focus on the things that we can control. So psychological safety is really, how do you ask open-ended questions, right? It's kind of an art in coaching when you get to that point. How do you ask open-ended questions and allow people to express if they have doubts, if they have reservations, if they have, no matter what it is that they may have. Now you can use that information to create your strategy. And that creates the space that we need later on when we are faced with difficulties, where we store that energy, where we talk about the second step, the potential energy.
I've heard you share that story many times, and it just always blows me away. The challenges and the obstacles that you and your sister had to overcome and ended up playing. the process you talked about, just so simple, removing the distractions, focusing on the things that you can control. Very cool. Your comment about open-ended questions. Tell me if you think I did a good job here. When I became the athletic director at my last school, the McClay School in Tallahassee several years ago, I didn't have some aha moment, but I decided that I was going to, and I did this usually, I was going to meet with every single coach, head coach, assistant coach. We had like 80 coaches. And the very first question I asked them, the only question I asked them really was, how can I make your job more fun? And, they, to a person, they said, well, geez, nobody's ever asked us that before. And it was already a successful program. They needed some tweaks here and there, but I just thought, how can I help these coaches, do a good job and even do a better job? So hopefully I was creating some psychological safety there. What do you think?
I think you did a great job. I think that was an amazing and very transformative question, because there's so much wrapped into the word fun, right? Because obviously that implies that winning is involved there. I don't think anybody has a lot of fun if they keep losing and losing and losing. So you are asking that, but you are asking it in a way that also allowed the coach to come up with, well, what really would make my job more fun? I mean, of course, we know that winning will make my job more fun, but what else is meaningful? What else will give me that satisfaction at the end of the day? So I think that was a genius question to go into the season and ask that.
All right. Well, thank you. Again, they're a very successful program. They're still successful without me, but I had a lot of fun working with them. The fourth point that you shared with me was this idea of creating what you called potential energy, and then unleashing that energy, which, again, another great visual. So tell our listeners what you mean by that.
Well, potential energy, when we talk about it in physics, it's basically the energy that is stored within a body when it has changed the position relative to its environment. So how do you do that on a team? How do you create that potential energy? It's exactly those open-ended questions, that great question that you ask the coaches, by getting to know them a little bit more on a personal level. What really matters to them? What is going to make their job more fun? Not just the results that they will be producing, because the results, they take care of themselves when we are performing at that highest level and we have the energy to do it. So I think the question about psychological safety, being able to create an environment where people can express freely their doubts, their problems, or their wants that they may have, even if they think that, from knowing you, that it may be an opposing view. But when you are open to that feedback, then people are more willing to show you their vulnerabilities, right? So here's another key word. In sports, a lot of times we see vulnerability as weakness. That's how I grew up. It was a very guarded, closely guarded way of dealing with things. And in competition, if you expose any kind of vulnerability, it will be used against you. But what I have learned now, and what I have learned since then, competing at that highest level, is that in fact, vulnerability is a key to create that strong bond within a team. Now, this is something that you invest in at the end of the year. So we're coming up on the end of the year. We're going into the summer before you start the new school year, let's say in the fall of 2022. This is the time to really invest in creating the psychological safety by asking open-ended questions, building that trust that people know that you have their highest interest, not just your own interest, but their highest interest top of mind, right? By getting to know them deeper, what makes their job more fun? How do they define success? That's another great open-ended question. How do you define success? What would be something that you would want to have in your program on your team? That is how we create potential energy on our team. And now that potential energy is stored in those bonds, in those conversations, in those team building activities that we do at the beginning of the season. And then when you're met with an obstacle, this is the place that you go to turn that obstacle into an opportunity. Now, it's not something that you can do in the moment of rapid fire when competition and changing environments are coming at you very fast, let's say when you start the fall. You have to have done that kind of work prior to then. And this is what I mean by creating that potential energy within your team. And then when you're met with an obstacle and something isn't going the way that you want, when there is a changing environment, we have to stay agile. But by going back and saying, I know what matters most to you, I have your back, right? In this situation, this is the dividends that then we get to reap from doing that work early on.
Well, I was just, thinking about our school year and the different seasons and all the different opportunities that an AD has to do these types of activities with their coaches. Very, very cool stuff. So just to review for me, prioritization, finding and focusing on those things that are most important, using those quadrants that you talked about, working to empower your coaches so they can become the best version of themselves, creating that psychological safety, asking those open-ended questions and building trust within the team, your team of coaches, and then creating that potential energy that at the right moment, when it's most needed, it can be unleashed. Did I do a pretty good job?
You did an amazing job, Jake. Thank you for summarizing all of it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm good at summarizing somebody else's brilliance. Once again, Lena Taylor, if one of our listeners wants to reach out, pick your brain a little bit more, or find out about all the cool things that you're doing, what's the best way that they can get in touch with you?
Send me an email, lena@lenataylor.com. Go on the website, lenataylor.com. And I do a lot of cool experiences, a 60-minute virtual training that I do with companies around the world. And I can tell you more about that if anyone is interested.
I think it'd be a great thing for your coaching staff or even your entire school district. Check it out. Close the Gap Leadership, and also check out her podcast, Next Level Podcast with Lena Taylor. Lena, thanks so much for sharing today. Thanks so much for being a part of Wednesday Wisdom.
Thank you, Jake. I really appreciate it.
For listeners, remember the Zoom recordings of all the interviews get uploaded to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We appreciate you listening today. Come back again next week for more Wednesday Wisdom, and just about every day for new content on the Educational AD Podcast. Thanks again. Once again, we want to thank all of our sponsors for their support of the Educational AD Podcast and Wednesday Wisdom. I want to thank Final Form, Sideline Interactive, Violet Defense, Huddle, Hometown Ticketing, Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack, and Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. We couldn't do this without the support of our sponsors. Please check them out and find out all the things they can do for you and your program. We'll see you next time on Wednesday Wisdom and the Educational AD Podcast.